While Arsenal are regaining their fitness in Dubai currently, a lot of players are getting the rest they deserve. Now, with this being said, a surprise entry within the camp is one of Max Dowman. And over the last few months, this 15-year-old has been breaking headlines in the Arsenal Academy, and I think it's finally time we speak about him. So let's get into it. Now, most of you by now will have heard of Max Dowman because he has been literally everywhere. Over the last couple of months, he has trained with the first team numerous of times. He has been a star for the under-18s Arsenal team at just the age of 14, just turned 15. And he went with Arsenal on their Dubai tour, where I guess he got taken out of school because he is still in year 10, which is mental to think about. Now, I have put off this video for quite a while because I didn't necessarily want to talk about someone who is so young and put pressure on him, because obviously that's not necessarily a positive thing. However, by Arteta's comments in the press about him and the fact that he's been photographed a lot more and actively been on the Arsenal socials with him front and centre in the training, it makes me think Arsenal are pushing him a lot more over the last couple of weeks, where I feel comfortable to talk about him a little bit more. But obviously you have to remember he is incredibly young. Now, although I would say a lot of youngsters are definitely hyped up when they're younger, even when Neri was, obviously playing at 15 in the Premier League does help that, but Dowman has been hyped up for a few years now, and I do think it is at a different level to other players. He's not only the shining light in the academy right now, of course not including the players that came up this season, but he is considered one of the best players to ever play for Arsenal's academy because he is just so dominant. Now, first of all, you might be asking what sort of position does he play? Well, he is more of an attacking midfielder / right winger, but can also play in that 8 central midfield role, which is very similar on position wise to obviously Neri, obviously Martin Odegaard, and obviously Saka are 3 players that you really see coming through and playing for us quite a lot. Now, he is pretty versatile in the positions he can play, pretty much anywhere in that attacking midfield line. He can play on the right wing as well, which is very important. Now, one of the reasons which make him quite effective at this is because when he plays yet again in that right half channel, which we love, we have so many players come through there, he is much more likely to overlap and play on that wing sort of position to help the winger and make runs for him than players like Odegaard or maybe Neri you would see in the past, although of course Neri has done a good job in right wing when he's been positioned there. Now, this is because this guy's dribbling is kind of mental. When you see youngsters, they usually come through because they're physically a lot better and a lot more advanced than the players around them, so they can easily dominate their opposition. Now, as a 15-year-old, he is playing at levels above his age, under 18s. He's even played a few games for the under 21s, where he is completely dominant, and it's mostly down to his dribbling ability. He is left-footed, but he can use both feet into an incredible great level. He has such good balance for his age. But the main thing is that he creates so much separation when dribbling, because when he receives, he can carry the ball in one straight motion. Now, this is something Arsenal specifically haven't got a lot of people doing them half-turn runs or can push into them attacking positions. Neri does have it a little bit, but we don't see him on the ball entirely a lot. Means Max Dowman can actually get into them half-space channels and just make direct runs going past players all the time. Now, something I have also seen when I've been watching him is that when he makes runs, he is very direct. He is sort of a very physical player. People will try and take him out and he'll stay on his feet and keep going, which obviously when you play in the Premier League is going to be a lot harder to have that sort of level as a child than it will be in the under 18s. But that sort of directness is something I really like that approach as well. This is combined with the fact that when he runs with the ball, he doesn't really lose much of his pace from when he's not got the ball. He is so good at just taking it in his stride, putting the ball forward and having it under control, which I think is a very unique thing to have at such a young age. And being able to go on the outside and the inside, making him a bit of a two-way winger, which I like to call it, which is usually developed over years of doing one and then the other, not so already. Now, another thing that I think is very unique about this player is that he plays at an incredibly quick level. Every time I watch him, especially for the under 18s, it just seems like he wants to be much more direct and he's much more willing to pick the ball up and run at people, or at least do a pass or something very quickly rather than the players around him. Keeping up with the pace, also a very important thing about his development in the future, which we also see Neri and Lewis Skelly have. I think when you watch, you kind of forget the perception of how quick people play in the professional level, especially in the Premier League, and that can be a hard transition to always get to, which I do really think that he can be at that level. And he's also got that typical Arsenal hell end thing where the players are just incredibly intelligent at a young age. We always go on about it, and I've always said that I think Lewis Skelly and Neri's best asset is being so intelligent of when to do certain actions compared to other players of that age. And obviously it's very early days, but I do think Max Dowman also possesses this ability. Obviously it helps with the fact that he is so good at going inside out, direct, and being a bit slower as well if he needs to be, but he is so intelligent of when to actually do these actions. It becomes so effective. In the final third, he is one of the most effective players at such a young age, because when he goes past players, he really makes the right decision. I've seen him be very unselfish in the past and pass it inside or maybe out to a winger, and sometimes he knows when to pick the ball up, run past the player and shoot from distance. And this follows on to the fact that this guy's finishing is incredible. He's got a really great shot on his left foot, specifically when he cuts inside, but also cuts across, which he likes doing from the midfield. But that's not the only thing. He's also actually quite good on his right foot. He gets a lot of power on his right foot, considering it is his quote-unquote weaker foot, and he has scored some nice goals with it as well. So I do think he's a player that can use both feet to a high level. Now, he's definitely a player most effective, I think, from the attacking areas, because I think he is so good in them. But something I do also want to highlight is that he can play in central midfield. He can play as an attacking midfield player, but also be a little bit of a box to box. He isn't necessarily that defensive outlet. He's not going to come back and do all the tackles in the world, but he is so good at driving with the ball that he is really good as well from deep. There's a few times that he'll pick the ball up from really deep positions. There'll be quite a few players around him, and he'll just run directly through the center of 3 or 4 players, riding tackles and just having that power to get through. Now, that obviously is going to be harder physically to do that in a higher league when you get professional, because people are just going to bully you a lot more, and people at the end of the day are actual men in the Premier League. But by what I can tell, Max Dowman is definitely a carry first sort of player. He's a really good passer as well. I think yet again in the final third, he's probably a really good passer. He makes some really good passes out wide or in the box. He makes good decisions. But because he's playing at a level that he is thriving at, obviously you're going to see a lot more attacking moves than defensive moves, just because the other teams aren't necessarily as good as him. And that is an incredible compliment to have. This guy just turned 15 a month ago and was 14 before that. He was put permanently in the Arsenal under-18 side this season at 14, which is incredible in itself, and has been training with the Arsenal first team on and off since November, where he first got his start. Mikel Arteta has come out and said that he's been impressed by him in training, and they clearly put a massive inclusion on having a pathway for Max Dowman. I've heard apparently it's the biggest they've ever done for a youngster. And even this week when he's out in Dubai, there's clips of him going past Arsenal's first team players and scoring a brilliant goal in training, where it just makes you think, how are you doing this at your age? That is absurd. Now, the next question might be, well, where is he going to make his Arsenal debut? I believe he probably would have made his debut this season, but he isn't going to because of a few issues. Now, the main one is the legislation of aged players in the Premier League. Now, what I mean by that is, in the Premier League, you can't technically play anyone who was 14 when the season started. Ethan Nwaneri made the youngest debut ever in Premier League history when he was 15, but he started as 15 at that start of that season, which he hasn't. He only just turned 15 last month. Now, he could have played in the FA Cup, however, but I do obviously think Arsenal played United in the first game and then we went out, and if we had a weaker tie, I think he probably would have got that level, but unfortunately that's not how the draw went for us this year. And with the Champions League, it's up in the air if he can play or not. He's trained for some of our Champions League games. Obviously don't expect to see him now, but he probably could have come in for a group game, maybe for a couple of minutes. But I think you have to be 16 as well in that, but the laws on the website are quite confusing, so I think a lot of people are still confused, but I think that is what it is. Now, we have players in his way as well. He can play on the right wing really well, so maybe future backup, but he is so young, so I wouldn't really think about that too much just yet. And Ethan Nwaneri and obviously Martin Odegaard are in that role, and they are going to be really good role models for him, I think, personally, but we'll have to see what happens in the future. Now, I don't want to put personally too much pressure on this kid because he is so young. He just turned 15. It's a long way to the Premier League, and even though I think a lot of scouts and younger analysis are talking about he is one of the most special players they have ever seen at that age group, it's obviously a long way. You've seen a lot of big talents in the past not really live up to it, so I don't want to put too much pressure on him, of course. But it is quite clear that Arteta and Arsenal are trying to push him more. They've spoke about him quite a lot recently, which makes me think next season, still at the age of 15, he will probably make a debut, even if it's for a couple of minutes, because he's getting even more fast track than people like Nwaneri were when he obviously started at 15 as well. Now, let me know in the comments what you guys think, and I'll see you in the next one.